I'm going to show you how I created a Wes Anderson inspired drinks photograph using 2 lights, 2 pieces of card, 2 plinths, and 1 grasshopper martini. I'm going to show you the lighting techniques, the camera, the settings, the whole shebang, everything you need to know to get this shot done. My name's Scott over at Tin House Studios, and this channel is all about helping photographers turn their passion into a profession. And with this shot here, it was heavily inspired by Wes Anderson. I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan, if you didn't know this already. Wes Anderson, he is the director of choice for me. I love his films. And as I just brought out a new one that I saw the other day, which was absolutely amazing, I thought now's as good a time as any to go through it. So first of all, let's break down what a Wes Anderson photo is, and then let's jump into camera settings. So Wes Anderson has this beautiful aesthetic, and it includes symmetry, a particular color palette, a sort of retro early 1950s, 1920s, sometimes it varies a little bit, but a retro vibe to it. It is between those decades. It's often very monochromatic in its color palette, or maybe only shows a few colors. But the symmetry is a big one for me, and having that symmetry is key. Now, I worked with a great team on this. We had a stylist, a set stylist, a retoucher, a couple of assistants, and somebody producing the whole shoot. It was very good. We planned this in advance. We'd sorted out the cocktails. We'd already decided on the monochromatic nature of them all, and we had a beautiful mood board put together of colours and drinks. All I had to do was assemble it, and that's what the photographer does in this world. So I knew I was going down the Wes Anderson vibe. I'd got the colours, I'd got the drinks. I just had to produce it. Now, as with every shot, the first thing you need to do is get the camera ready, and having the camera level is very important for a Wes Anderson shot. It needs to be perpendicular. Now, what you might notice in this photograph is that you can see slightly into the top, and that's because I used a technical camera. So I had the camera straight on, and I raised and dropped the sensor a little bits at a time until I could see on top of the glass whilst having everything straight. That is not something you can do with a standard camera, but you can probably fluff it in post, I'm sure. That is step 1. Step 2 is building the set. So we've got the camera level, and at this point, we build everything to the camera. The camera is the anchor point. We knew we wanted it level, so now we build everything around it. And we started off with just some standard card. A1 card sheets, you can get them from Hobbycraft, Home Depot, any sort of shop. We got some really nice, and I think it's like an arsenic green. So we'd got those. We put one flat on the table and one draped as a background, which we pushed a little bit further back so the shadows didn't hit the back wall, and they actually fell into a gap where no paper existed. Very useful tip there. Now, the plinths themselves we got from Mad Dog Props, what are they called? Mad Props. I'll pop a link in the description. I paid for them. They're not a sponsor. Very good though. We sprayed them with some Montana spray paints. We've got the spray paints to be as close as possible to the card, and a nice dusting done by Sammy, the set stylist, did a great job on that, giving them a nice even coating. We then started to build the set. Now the camera is already level to the table. We've got the card in place. The first thing we need to do is place the glass in the center. The glass is perfectly centered to the frame. We then want to put this half circle plinth under it just to raise it up and give it a bit of that Art Deco vibe. And finally, there is the arch. Now the trick to this, and to make it not look ridiculous, get everything perfectly symmetrical and then knock it a bit off. If you do a shot like this, where it's perfectly symmetrical or seemingly perfectly symmetrical, and you leave it exactly perfect, it looks like someone's come in and done it in Photoshop. Now, if you have it too far off, it looks like you've done a bad job. There's a real finessing to this, and you'll see in these other shots I'm popping up. They look perfect from a distance, but as soon as you start to really eyeball it or put some lines on there, it's not perfect. Everything's slightly off, slightly not right. And that allows the viewer's eye to know that it is a real photograph. And it took me a long time to learn this. I used to get them absolutely perfect. We use a laser, so we can like laser it on and get them everything absolutely bang on. And people are like, do you do that with a clone stamp? And it's like, great, I spent all that time and it looks like I've just clone stamped it in. So very important to get it perfect, and then just knock it slightly off. And you'll know when it's right, because if it looks like it's been knocked off, you've gone too far. It's just those small little differences. Now, you'll notice a few things on this shot, and one is that the caustic, which is the shadow coming through the glass, on the ground is very light and clear. The actual shadow from this, if we'd have shot it with the drink in there, it's just a black blob, and it doesn't look that appealing. So we took one shot with the glass empty for the caustic, and one shot with the glass full. This is really common. It's called taking a back plate. We lit the drink 45 degrees left with one light source. We used what's called a sunlight. And it's basically a big beauty dish with baffles on it. It's a bit more advanced than that, but you can get the same look pretty much from that. Or a large reflector with just some tracing paper over the front. We then had a second light going across the back to soften the shadows. A big thing in Wes Anderson films is they're shadowless. But I don't feel that this shot worked with no shadows, and although it's inspired by Wes Anderson, we're not copying Wes Anderson, and my work has shadows. All of my work has big, bold shadows. So I couldn't have my usual shadows in there with it still keeping the Wes Anderson vibe, so we just shot some light down the back just to soften those shadows caused by the plinth. Now, what you'll notice is the shadows are heading off to the right, and as a really basic thing, if you want to make an image that reads well, that isn't awkward to read with your eyes, it's always good to left to right, because we read a book left to right, so having the shadows falling off to the right makes sense to us. So that was a big decider as to where the light goes. Now, in terms of settings, because this is the next thing coming in here, I first of all decided my depth of field. And to get the depth of field I wanted with my camera, I needed to be at f/22. Don't talk about diffraction, it's a large format lens. We had plenty of room to play here. This is a really high-end Schneider digital lens. You can stop it down to f/64 and there's still no diffraction. Beautiful lens. 75mm, so it gave us a 50mm field of view because we're shooting on a 6 by 4.5cm digital back, which is 150 megapixels, 16-bit depth. We've got it all nicely lined up. We've got the ISO at 50 because that's the best ISO on the camera. So now, because we've chosen the depth of field, we've chosen the ISO, the power on the light is our variable. So we take one frame and it's pitch black. I always do this first, it's very important. If you want to learn how to light, I've got a whole workshop on this, and it will go through all of these things in much more detail than I'm going to do here. We know the angle of light we want for the shadow. So the place where the light is so we get the right shadows. The distance is so we get even lighting across the frame. If it's too close, we get fall off of light, so we need it a little bit further back. So now all we have to do is dial in the power, and we're using a Godox P2400, and we were at 2,400 watts straight in. Then to balance the shadows, once we've got this, obviously the shadow is very dark at this stage, the second light coming across the background with just a spill and a grid on it, we just slowly turn it up until the shadows are just how we wanted them. This is how I calculate all of these bits here. Now, this is a test shoot. There's no client involved here. This is just something we're doing for fun. But if the client was there, they'd start to go, we can have deeper shadows, lighter shadows, whatever it may be. That is when we adjust it on set. And that is really where you need to know the technical side of photography, because you never know what a client's going to ask for. And if they ask for it, they need to get it because they're paying you big money to be able to do those things. So there wasn't too much of how do we fix these problems, because I already knew about them because it was my idea. But that is something you do have to consider. Now, you'll notice as well, there's no big specular highlight on the glass. It looks very flat and very matte. And that is because we've used movements on the camera so that the camera can't actually see them. And this is using a technical camera. I won't go into too much detail in there, but that's how we did that. There's no Photoshop cloning out or weird trickery. It's just we had the camera angled in a certain way with all the movement, the tilt, the swing, the shift, the rise, the fall, so that you couldn't see that. It's very useful having that bit of kit for things like this, especially when a specular highlight's coming in. Once we'd got the shot all nicely nailed in, the star's done a great job on this chocolate rim around the top of the grasshopper. We took it into post-production and we did a tidy up of the paper because you always get this texture coming through and I don't like that. And we just buffed out a few scratches in the background because obviously I knocked the plinth over and it scratched itself. So that was all there was to it. Very simple, very methodical process to it. And hopefully this has been interesting and of use to you and something that you can now implement or take something away from. Let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see next. I'm going to make more of these videos where we do shoots. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.